Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Sexton of Granger will introduce the chaplain of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's certainly an honor for me to get to introduce our minister of the day. Most of us know him well. His name, of course, is Bill Geisel. He graduated from the Tennessee Temple University. He served in pastoral ministry since 1986 in Tennessee, South Carolina, Michigan, Indiana, and Ontario, Canada. He currently serves as the state minister for the Tennessee with Capital Commission Ministries, and he served as a volunteer chaplain to the Tennessee legislature for the last 6 years. He also conducts a Bible study year-round. He has that staff Bible study on Mondays at noon, and then every Tuesday at 7:30 for the members. He also organized and led a state legislator trip to Israel in 2019. And besides all of the holy places that we were able to visit, we had the pleasure of visiting the Israeli Mission of Foreign Affairs. And he's also getting another group together for this fall. He lives in Knoxville with his wife, Cynthia, and he has 4 sons, Nate, Andrew, Daniel, and Benjamin, and 2 grandsons, Simon and William. So we're going to ask Brother Bill to give us the prayer and say a word. Brother Bill.
Thank you. Today's the 28th day of the month. And so as the pattern for many is to read the proverb that corresponds to the day of the month. So being encouraged by Representative Chisholm to return to that commitment and to share a proverb, I wanted to share one with you from chapter 28, verse 2. When a land transgresses, it has many rulers, but with a man of understanding and knowledge, its stability will long continue. It's no secret that we live in a land that has many challenges today. Challenges in the country, challenges in the city, in the hills, and on the streets, in the valleys, in the hollers, and all around. None of us are immune to the challenge. I want to encourage you from God's word that he says there's never been a more important time for you, men and women, to be people of understanding and knowledge in order that the desire of all of us that this nation be stable and continue for a long time may be the blessing of God upon us. So with that, let's pray. Father, these are difficult days to be a public servant. And there are few that are willing to step into the fray and to even seek to lead. And so for that, may your favor and your blessing be on these men and women today. I pray, Lord, that you would grant to this body collectively and to each one individually an unusual measure of wisdom and discernment and guidance and prudence and knowledge and equity and justice and mercy. May what is done here in Tennessee and in these honored halls be a beacon of light and hope, not only for our state, but for the nation. And may the words of our mouths and the thoughts of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Representative Sexton will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Byrd, Carter, Potts are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring who seeking recognition. Representative Wendell.
Mr. Speaker and members, I want to recognize and thank our intern for the year, Miriam Yusuf. Please stand up. Everybody wave to Miriam. Mr. Speaker, this TSU student is a positive reflection on TSU. She's hardworking, she's thoughtful, she's consistent, and she's dedicated. And I believe she's got a bright future in front of her no matter what she wants to do. And I appreciate your friendship during this session and the way you've conducted yourself. You're a good reflection on your family. And thank you.
Representative Rutter.
Paul, right here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague and I, Paul Sherrill, rise today to ask you to please keep the town of Monteagle, Tennessee, the Oliver family, and the employees of Jim Oliver Smokehouse in your thoughts and prayers. They have the Smokehouse restaurant there in Monteagle and the gift shop. Mr. Oliver built that restaurant in 1975 and has served over 20 million customers. Yesterday around 4 o'clock, this historic landmark was destroyed when it caught fire. There were more than 25 fire departments that responded, and thankfully there were no lives lost and no injuries. So thank you to the first responders that helped the people in Monteagle and helped save the cabins and part of the hotel. This landmark is one of the most famous restaurants on the Dixie Highway. I just ask you to keep the Oliver family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Cooper at Leader Camper's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for everybody, all of the legislators here, this august body, to recognize my 24-year-old constituent who's been serving and working in the community very, very hard, David Page. Let us all welcome him, please. I think he's standing up there, Senator Page.
Representative Jernigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to honor my intern, Chandler Claiborne. Stand up, sir. This guy, listen, Mr. Speaker, I'm very high maintenance in my office, and he made Fisk University very proud by keeping up with me. So, yes, I appreciate it, sir. Good luck to you.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to give a shout out and publicly say thank you to my intern, Arasi Abel, in the balcony up here. He will be graduating from the Tennessee State University on this Saturday with his bachelor's degree in political science. He already has his Associates of Arts degree from Austin Peay State University. He's a very sharp young man, and I am very honored to have him working in my office. He has created most of the talking points for a lot of the legislation that I ran this year. He was very eager to learn many different issues and topics. And so I just want to say thank you so much to him. It's definitely the dedication for me. And so please give him a round of applause, and I wish him the best in all that he does.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please join me in wishing our beautiful little granddaughter, Charlotte Grace, a happy 8th birthday. Thank you.
Representative Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday in Hamlin County, one of our off-duty officers from Hamlin County Sheriff's Department was on his way home and noticed smoke coming out of a roof of a house. And he stopped and helped a gentleman back out of the house who had gone back in to retrieve his dogs. And after that, Deputy Donnie Davis went back into the house and got the gentleman's dogs out. after the East Hamlin County Volunteer Fire Department arrived, the homeowners, their son had passed away in 2019 and his urn was still in the house. And East Hamlin County volunteer firefighter Rebecca Boatman crawled through a window to retrieve the urn for the family. And I'd just like to say thank you to all of them and all the first responders. But these guys showed a great deal of bravery and commitment to our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Transportation Office sadly says goodbye to our intern, Sania Hernandez. If you would stand. Sania's winning personality, beautiful smile, and bubbly personality has certainly brightened up the Transportation Office this session, and we are sad to see her go, and she will be graduating college Saturday morning. Congratulations.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I wanted to thank my intern who served in the leader's office, very dedicated young lady who is not here today because she took her vaccine, second dose yesterday, and she is out today. But I want to thank her for her service to the state. She'll be graduating MTSU on May 7th, and she did so much to help our caucus, and I greatly appreciate her being here with us. Thank you. Would you all make her feel appreciated?
Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And staying in the spirit here, I'd like to thank my intern, Sarah Stansberry. She'll stand up. Sarah was very instrumental in all of the education bills that we worked on this year. She has an incredibly bright future, and just want to say thank you.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I'd like to thank a young lady. She's our house clerk. Her name is Alicia Downer. Today is her birthday, and she's also a 2020 graduate of Tennessee State University and an accomplished saxophonist as well. Happy birthday.
Representative Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you may recall I rose on this House floor a few months ago to welcome Mo Campbell, my intern, but I would be remiss if I did not thank her for her work this year, especially in her providing baked goods to about 99% of the General Assembly. So I think Dan Howell was a big fan of those baked goods as well. So anyway, thank you, Mo.
Anyone else under welcoming and honoring? Seeing none. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing lying on the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that Senate bills 102, 222, 267, 364, 424, 439, 448, 557, 677, 1030, 1077, 1105, 1271, 1335, 1552, and 1,591 transmitted by the Senate be held to the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 17, House Joint Resolution 535 has been objected to by Leader Gant.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In consultation with both leaders, I'd like to ask that on item 13 on the consent calendar, Representative Mike Carter be listed as the leading prime sponsor. Thank you.
Exclusion duly noted without objections ordered. Anyone else? Seeing none. We are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, one nay.
Having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call it first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 718 by Chairman Keesley.
Chairman Keesley, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I request a roll to Tuesday's calendar, Mr. Speaker?
Without objection to this coming Tuesday. Right. Without objection, roll to Tuesday's calendar. So ordered. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1171 by Chairman Terry and others relative to firearms.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1171 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Terry moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio, you. Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Amendment 2 by Chairman Terry, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment corrects a typo and makes some clarification. Move to adopt.
Representative Terry moves adoption amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment we just adopted tightens up the language of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Therefore, move to withdraw.
Without objection, withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it adds a Class A misdemeanor to a state or political subdivision personnel that discloses firearm information for the purpose of confiscation or registration. And second, it grants a cause of action for a firearm owner against an individual who discloses unlawfully obtained firearm information for the purpose of registration or confiscation. The bill does have some exclusions for the Post Commission and Department of Safety. I renew my motion.
Chairman Terry renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor, just I guess it's more of a technical question. So the bill makes it criminal for someone to let people know that someone owns a firearm. Is that what we're doing?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you for that. In the event that the feds, currently there is not a federal registry or confiscation, although there is a bill out there called the Firearm Licensing and Registration Act that was filed on March 1st. But in the event that there is a federal registry or confiscation, if somebody violated this and they were personnel of this state, it would be a Class A misdemeanor. If they unlawfully obtained that information otherwise and did it, then it would be a cause of action against that individual.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the bill that we're passing, we don't really have that issue right now, right? So this bill won't do anything when we pass it right now, today. Am I correct?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. As of right now, there is not a federal registration or cause of action. This is a proactive bill.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate your choice of words, a proactive bill. My choice of words would be more of a problem looking for a solution. However, I also want to ask, in the event that, let's say, a federal registry does happen, or whatever the scenario was that you said, and I mean this in the kindest way. If there's an individual that has or is part of a criminal act that has these firearms, and someone from a political subdivision of the state says, hey, this person has a whole arsenal of firearms in his house, will they be held in criminally under that scenario?
Chairman Terry.
I've worked with Department of Safety on that. There are exclusions in this bill.
President Parkinson.
Thank you for that. Can you tell me what the exclusions are, if you don't mind, Dr. Terry?
Chairman Terry.
On Section 2, the section does not apply to information that's provided to the government entity pursuant, and there's several codes in there, TCA code 38, 116, 38, 8, 123, et cetera, or as part of a criminal investigation. It says that in the bill.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Terry. I think this just I think we might be wasting a little bit of state time right now on this one, because this scenario doesn't exist. And if the scenario ever did exist, I think that we could always come back and adjust the legislation. I'm not for anyone disclosing necessarily somebody that, privately has a firearm. But some of the legislation, honestly, that we're running it might not be necessary, or there's no real impetus for us to run it. But that's all I want to say on it. And thank you again, Mr. Sponsor and Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If necessary was the reason for us debating a bill, I think there'd be a lot that we wouldn't have dealt with this year, but this is necessary. We know what is going on the federal level, and I appreciate what you're doing here. Appreciate you bringing this. The citizens of this state are demanding this. We all get calls and emails and conversations about this weekly, and I appreciate you doing this, sir. Thank you.
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. And to answer a few questions on this and why I'm bringing this now, obviously the bill that's out there is the Firearm Licensing Registration Act, which basically you have to register your firearm within 3 months as a penalty of not less than $75,000 and 15 years in prison. And while we're not allowed to use props up here, I want you to take a look at me. I'm the prop that's up here. In this instance, I am the only card-carrying member of a Native American tribe. I'm a caucus of one. Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, and my tribe was the first to be forcibly removed. So at some point, the government had the guns, and my people didn't, and I'm currently in a position to do something about that to make sure it doesn't happen again. I renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. And you can help me because I honestly don't know. Will the federal guidelines that may come down the pike, will they affect your people?
Chairman Terry.
In the event that it will affect my family are card-carrying members as well.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that, because I always appreciate learning something new. Now, under the scenario, should the federal government come with this, I guess, registration or a list or whatever that you guys are hearing that they're coming with? And for the record, I hadn't gotten one phone call about this from my district. But so under this legislation, if passed, then an individual that would disclose the fact that another individual has a gun or a weapon would be criminally charged, correct?
Chairman Terry.
Can you repeat the question?
Representative Parkinson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chair. So under this legislation, I'm I'm trying to figure out if I'm gonna vote for this or not. So under this legislation, if we pass this today, this will be a preemptive piece of legislation should the feds pass a registry or something that says you have to register your guns?
Chairman Terry.
Correct.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you. And I'm just trying to I'm seeking more clarity. And so if that passes at the federal level and this bill passes at the state level, so an individual that works in government, I'm assuming, if they told that my neighbor, Mr. Johnson, has guns, they would be charged criminally, correct?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. As it says in the bill, if they disclose the information for the purpose of compiling or facilitating the compilation, it says within their official capacity of disclosing that information.
Representative Parkinson.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is really an anti-snitching law.
Chairman Terry.
If that's how you would like to describe it.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you. And this is my last comment. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. So, you know, in the communities that I come from, and you know where there are we have a fair share of shootings and things of that nature. Everyone asks that people step up and tell it and communicate with law enforcement and for those challenges that we face in some of our urban centers. And now we're passing a bill in the state that says don't snitch, don't tell it, even though they will possibly be outside of the law, the federal law. But we're telling them if you tell it, then you're going to be criminally charged. Hey, that happened before in the history of the United States. That happened if a slave ran away and you helped him, you would be criminally charged. If you have a gun and the feds have a list that say you have to register it, if I'm a government, I guess a person part of the government, state government, and if I tell it, I'm going to be criminally charged. This is an anti-snitching bill. Do we really want that? Is that what we really want to do?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. This bill protects our Second Amendment rights.
President Parkinson. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. I think I've gotten my head around this bill now. I apologize, but I just want to make something straight. So if the federal government passes the bill, this doesn't prevent the state from enacting the federal legislation or complying with federal legislation in any way, does it?
Chairman Terry.
Again, they cannot commandeer members, personnel of this state. We've already passed that Public Chapter 380. So if that's part of the bill, then that's not something that we would enact, and that's already state law.
Representative Clemens.
Okay, well, I mean, the supremacy clause is going to govern most of this stuff, but what I'm getting at is this legislation, if it's passed, won't prevent us from complying with the federal law that is passed, which would have supremacy over any state law. I'm just trying to make sure that the bill's being characterized correctly, and it does what I think it does, which is just says you can't take that information unlawfully from that registry if it's created and then shared with the intention to do X, Y, and Z. Is that correct?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. And then in one section of the bill, the section 1 of the bill, it does have an exclusion where I put in federal law in there, and that would be in the event that there's something that they enact in federal law where like a federal firearms licensure, an ammo, someone that deals with ammunition, if they have to comply with federal law, then yes, they would comply with federal law. And it's that.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for clarifying that. And also, I just want to make sure that if a law was passed, I think the language in here covers this, but I just want to make sure that if a law was passed such that someone thought that they were going to be in harm's way because someone had possession of a firearm, let's say a domestic violence situation where they knew somebody shouldn't have access to a firearm, they had obtained it unlawfully, but they needed to share that that individual was armed with a family member or someone else to try to protect themselves. This bill does not prevent that in any way from happening, does it, or does it not?
Chairman Terry.
You are correct. That was part of when I worked out with Department of Safety. Yes.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the sponsor. As the only descendant of Native Americans in this House, and based upon history of what happened when the government took guns away from the Native Americans, is this an attempt to address concerns of the Biden administration or any other administration for tracking Americans' possession of firearms? And is this a pushback against that effort and to protect against infringement of our Second Amendment rights and the rights under the Tennessee Constitution?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. Yes, it's to protect our Second Amendment rights from being infringed upon.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman Terry, and thank you, Speaker, for that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing no objection. All those in favor of House Bill 1171 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 74, 19 nays, one present on voting.
House Bill 1171 and received the Constitution majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 417 by Chair Lady Littleton, a resolution to commemorate April 28, 2021 as National Drug Endangered Children Awareness Day.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HJR 0417.
Chair Lady Littleton moves adoption. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a resolution to commemorate April 28, 2021 as National Drug Endangered Children Awareness Day. Whereas National Drug Endangered Children Awareness Day will be observed on April the 28th, 2021. And whereas National Drug Endangered Children Awareness Day is based upon the premise that every child should have the opportunity to experience a safe and healthy childhood free from the use of drugs and the effects of drug exposure. And whereas drug endangered children are at the risk of abuse and neglect due to their parents or caregivers, illegal drug use, possession, manufacturing, cultivation, and distribution. And whereas substance abuse by parents or caregivers interferes with their ability to provide a safe and nurturing environment for the children under their care. And whereas the mission of the Tennessee Alliance for Drug Endangered Children is to rescue, defend, shelter, and support children living in drug environments. And whereas the Tennessee Alliance for Drug Endangered Children's goal is to combine the expertise and resources of multiple professionals, agencies, and communities to improve interventions for drug endangered children and their families. And whereas with the intervention, drug endangered children can move from risk of resiliency, and whereas resiliency can break generational cycles of drug abuse and child abuse and can change the trajectory of children's lives. And whereas all citizens in Tennessee can play a role in reducing risk and building resiliency amongst drug endangered children. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we will join with the Tennessee Alliance of Drug Endangered Children and all other concerned parties in commemorating April 28, 2021 as National Drug Endangered Children Awareness Day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 417, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 417 and received the Constitution majority. I hereby declare it adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 777 by Chairman Sapiki and others relative to BEP funding for the 2021-2022 school year.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 777 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Spicki moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the Hold Harmless bill for our school systems across the state of Tennessee. I'll give you a brief explanation of it. Basically, here's the gist. Whatever your schools receive for the 2020-2021 school year, they will receive no matter what their attendance is for the 21-22 school year that is coming up shortly. If they have a growth in population, they will receive the necessary bump in finances. And then in 22-23, it returns to the normal way of how we fund our schools with attendance being taken. It is a one-year plan to make sure that we hold our school systems harmless across the state of Tennessee. Our county commissions are waiting for us to pass this as quickly as we can so they can finish their budgets. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Spicki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 777 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, 1 nay.
House Bill 777 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 913 by Representative Casta and others relative to tax refunds. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Casta, you are recognized.
Bill 883.
Representative Casta moves substitute form of Senate Bill 883, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Casta.
Mr. Speaker, I move the passage of Senate Bill 883 on third and final consideration.
Representative Casta moves passage of Senate Bill 883 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Casta, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this bill allows the Department of Revenue to work with consumers who feel like they are due a sales tax refund and under certain circumstances. With that, I renew my motion on third and final consideration.
Representative Casta renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 883 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 883 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 845 by Chairman Holtzclaw relative to consumption of alcoholic beverages on the premises. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 486.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves substitute form in Senate Bill 486, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 486 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Holtzclaw moves passage of Senate Bill 486 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's included in Senate Amendment 1 and 2.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is our premier resort omnibus bill. The Senate amendments make the bill, therefore we move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 486, it basically authorizes multiple entities to sell alcoholic beverages on premise consumption. With that, I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Holtzclaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 486, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 77, 11 ayes, 2 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 486, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 187 by Chairman Keesling.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like, may I request to roll this to the Hill, please?
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 545 by Chairman Dixie relative to release on parole. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1437.
Chairman Dixie moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1437, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1437 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Dixie moves passage of Senate Bill 1437 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's similar to Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 is similar to the Senate Amendment Number 1, but the Senate amendment specifies that the release plan must be created prior to the incarcerated individual's release. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does two things. The first thing it does, it amends the language by deleting the language defendant wherever it appears and substituting the language instead of incarcerated individuals. And the second thing it does, it sets up within 1 year of the red date or the release eligibility date that the employment of the Department of Correction shall meet with the incarcerated individual to create a release plan. And the parole board should meet in a reasonable time prior to or upon the individual's eligible release date. And I renew my motion.
Chairman Dixie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1437 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 1437, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1222 by Representative Hakeem relative to jailer qualifications. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 972.
Representative Hakeem moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 972 without objection. So ordered. Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 972 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hakeem moves passage of Senate Bill 972 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply attempts to clarify local governments can enter into contracts with licensed health care providers that are qualified in the psychiatric and psychological field for mental health evaluations in order to make hiring decisions for jails. And when the local government relies in good faith on the licensed healthcare professional's opinion for the hiring decision, it will not create a cause of action against the local government. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative King renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 972 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 972, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1377 by Chairman Crawford relative to dependent and neglected children.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1377 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Crawford moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt Amendment 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
No further amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is House Bill 1377, commonly known as Eli's Law. What this bill does is put protection in for children that have been removed by Children Protective Services. If the mother has another child and that the first child was taken due to neglect or violence, then it makes our judges aware, and they have the opportunity to check on the other child's welfare. I'm renew my motion.
Chairman Crawford renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1377 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Bill 1377, now received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 382 by Chairman Crawford and others relative to unlawful photography. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 331.
Chairman Crawford moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 331 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 331 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Crawford moves passage of Senate Bill 331 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is a few years ago, we revised the TCA area that dealt with unlawful photography. We had to add some few things in, and this bill is going in again and correcting a few loopholes that we left in there that we had some cases overturned. My DA brought me this bill, and it's supported by the DA's conference. What this bill does is it makes it safer for our wives and our children, and keeps people from taking pictures of intimate areas, and hopefully we can beat those loopholes. That's what the bill does. I renew my motion.
Chairman Crawford renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 331, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 331 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1347 by Chairman Curcio and others relative to emergency powers.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1347 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill so that the only substantive change is that it removes the specific name of the Joint Evaluation Committee that will review the executive agencies in question. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill corrects something that we did not intend to do, but when we granted the governor the emergency powers that we gifted to the executive branch, what we inadvertently did was we allowed them to create an executive agency that would have no oversight by the General Assembly. Those executive agencies could sign contracts, could procure services without any sort of oversight or sunset the way a normal department would. And so this bill corrects that. It just says that if a governor creates such an agency during a state of emergency, that it would come back to the General Assembly through the Government Operations Committee for an up or down vote on whether or not that executive agency should continue. With that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Curcio renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of House Bill 1347 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 1347 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1086 by Chairman Curcio, relative to evidence. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 448.
Chairman Curcio moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 448, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 448 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage of Senate Bill 448 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is in the Senate bill. Therefore, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, 20 years ago, the General Assembly passed the Post-Conviction DNA Analysis Act of 2001. What this bill would do is it would treat fingerprints the same way that we treat DNA. It's long overdue. This bill is supported by the District Attorney General's Conference, and be happy to take any questions. But with that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Curcio renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 448, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 448 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 888 by Chairman Curcio and others relative to expunction.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 888 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage. Bobby seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 makes the bill. Therefore, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we talk all the time about folks, cheering folks on when they pay their debt to society, they get their lives back together. We want them to go on and be normal, productive members of society. This is an important bill. It takes the next step for expungement in Tennessee and allows folks with nonviolent, non-sexual related records to have them expunged after a number of years, after they've paid their debt to society, after they've served their time, after they've paid their restitution, so on and so forth, so that they don't have to pay for their entire life over something they did when they were a younger person. So with that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Curcio renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just had one question. How far up the chain in the level of felonies does this go? And I'm assuming this is one bite at the apple.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I should have mentioned that. This changes nothing about how expungements work currently. So it's one bite at the apple. The highest up it would go is C. So the A's and B's are not in this bill. It just goes to a C.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor, appreciate you bringing this legislation. I think everyone in Tennessee can recognize the fact that people make mistakes, but then turn their lives around, deserve some credit and forgiveness. We're a forgiving nation. We're a Christian nation. So, and to that effect, it's my understanding under this legislation that if it's a Class C or D felony, again, we're talking about nonviolent, non-sexual offenses. If it's a Class C or D, someone's going to have to turn their life around for 10 years before they're ever allowed to apply. And if it's a Class would be an economic crime for a Class A or B felony, they're going to have to prove that they've turned their life for a period of 15 years and have gone without committing any of their offenses. And and shown that they're a member of the community. So is that accurate?
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, everything that you said is accurate, except that the body down the hall amended out the A's and the B's. I would have liked to have seen that for those folks that were nonviolent, non-sexual related. But yes, everything else that you said is accurate. So a person would have to serve their sentence, which, as you know, in some of these cases could be upwards of a 10-year sentence to begin with. Then they have to be a completely clean record for 10 years after that sentence. Have to pay all their fines and fees, their restitution, anything that they owed, and then they go before a judge to have it petitioned. So it's not even guaranteed that they would get it. We also wrote in some provisions that actually strengthens the way it works now. The DAs, they technically get a say, but it's a little more of a cursory glance at the file. Under this legislation, the DAs will have more of a seat at the table as well, so that if they got somebody that they feel like does not deserve this, they'll be able to let the court know that, and even can do that in private. Let's say they've got a pending charge or something on somebody and they need to keep that confidential, they can do that as well.
Representative Griffin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that explanation, and I think this is smart legislation that shows that we can take a smart approach to criminal justice reform, and I appreciate you bringing this legislation. Thank you very much.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to the sponsor for bringing this legislation. It is a great piece of legislation, and we've talked back and forth on this many times. And and you know my thoughts on it. I just don't think it goes far enough. And just for example, even with the misdemeanors, most misdemeanors are punishable by 11 months, 29 days, but we're still asking them to wait another 5 years before they can get expunged. I think that's an exorbitant time to help someone get back on that track of being a good, productive citizen in this country, especially to the state of Tennessee. So I think it's a good start, but I would hope that in future General Assemblies that we can look at getting this more in line with the studies, because 3 years, studies have proven in 3 years that the recidivism rate starts to go down. And at year 5, it plateaus. And we need to get those expunction dates that you're setting forth at 5, 10, and 15 years more in line with that. But again, thank you. But hopefully in future General Assemblies that we can really give some strong consideration to really helping people get back on track, getting their lives back on track, and be a productive citizen and be able to provide for their families sooner, especially if they have a proven track record of turning their lives around. So thank you again.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate those comments. I guess all I would say is that incremental progress is still progress. And I like that Tennessee has led the nation, by the way. We were the first state to be able to allow those D and E felonies to be expunged to begin with. And so we watched that for a number of years to make sure that it worked well, that we didn't have any problems with it. And this is a way to build on that success. And I agree with you. Let's watch this. And if there's a way we can come back in the future and build on that success, then I welcome that exercise. So thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 888 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 888, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 358 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh and others relative to delinquent personal property taxes.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 358 on third and final consideration.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill states that a county trustee may proceed against a taxpayer who's delinquent in the payment of tangible personal property taxes by retaining an agent to collect such delinquent personal property taxes, and if collection agent is retained, the county trustee shall utilize the bidding process applicable to the county. The agent's collection fee should not exceed 30%, and the agent must be licensed and in good standing. With that, I renew my motion.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the sponsor yield?
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
So, are there any other examples where we're having individuals, or I guess in this case the trustee, but we're having government entities being able to hire agents to go out and try to collect taxes? And I see they have to be certified, but it also looks like the person that owes the taxes would then also have to pay for the agent, for the cost of that agent. And I just want to know if there's another example of this that might take place.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
The way I understand it, the trustees are having problems collecting some of these past due taxes. And at the present time, they're not able to utilize a collection agent. If they want to utilize a collection agent, the county has to approve through the bidding process a certified licensed agent. Then the county trustee would hire that collection agent to go out and collect these taxes. The taxes would be, there would be up to a 30% fee for the collection agent added on top of the current taxes. So the county would be whole if they're collecting these past due taxes, and the agent would be able to make a fee of up to 30%.
Representative Powell.
Thank you. And I guess I just want to be on record. I honestly, and firmly believe that everybody should pay their taxes and pay their taxes timely. But I realize that people can have certain situations arise where they might become delinquent on their taxes and need to catch up. And I just worry about the fact of you're having a fee of up to 30% that's then taxed on top of that. We're creating a cycle of poverty that's tough for people to escape. And so with that, I do have some concerns about the bill. I understand what the trustees are trying to do, but that gives me some pause to know that you could have an up to a 30% fee to go out and try to recover the taxes. And again, I firmly believe that people need to pay their taxes. And if not, there's a method for going after individuals, I think already in the statutes that's sufficient. And I just worry about having agents out there gives me some pause. But I appreciate you with the bill and addressing my concerns.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
And I understand your concerns, and this is permissive. If the trustee does not want to do this, they don't have to, and it's not a mandatory 30%, it's up to 30%. So they really don't have to do anything. If they want to utilize a collection agent, they can.
Representative Vogels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Speaker Marsh, I mirror some of the concerns, and one of that is that some of these agencies, in fact, don't run really efficiently. And I've, in the past, seen incidences where a fairly small property tax bill laid over for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, compounded penalties and interest, and by the time that it was sent out, is it a extremely expensive bill. So then you tack on another 30%. And some of these, if we read our code, there's not a requirement for notice on some of these property taxes. The property owner is responsible for paying those taxes, even though no notice has actually ever been given. So just a little concern, something we may look at in the future. In the instances where those notices are not given, I think there should be a provision to maybe work on those penalties and interest. But thank you, sponsor.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
Fine.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker Sexton. To the sponsor, it's clarification. Are we talking about personal or real property?
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
We're talking about tangible personal property taxes.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Well, I appreciate the clarification. Either one, I'm in agreement with the previous speaker that it just doesn't make sense to me to raise it by another third if the taxpayer is having difficulty already. So I'm afraid I'll have to vote against your bill.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
And I do understand, and this, like I said before, this is permissive. They don't have to do this. It just gives them the option to do it, and it does not have to be 30%. It could be 5%. It could be up to 30%, but strictly on their own. Permissive.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Thank you, Speaker. And that means that the local legislative body, the county commission, I'll assume, is who would have to put this into motion.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
The way the bill states is the local county trustee can request this. The county has to go through the purchasing procedure and qualify a licensed agent that is in good standing to be able to do this.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Are you?
You did say that it's permissive and up to 30%. Just recently in Shelby County, we began to receive our property tax appraisals from the tax assessor's office. And normally that's an increase in your property. And in many cases, what happens with that, your property taxes are increased based on that assessment. The question is, assuming your bill will pass, you're already looking at delinquent property tax, and then on top of that, up to 30%. Now there may be a situation where on that particular piece of property, if it's assessed at a higher, and then your taxes are adjusted to that, could that happen? Or would the individual be responsible for that increase in the assessment of their property? That's really my question.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
The way I understand it, if you own property and the law is you must pay property taxes, then you would be responsible for paying those taxes. It wouldn't matter whether they went up or they stayed the same. But this bill only says that you're able to hire a collection agent if you want to. You don't have to.
Representative Miller.
Yes, and I agree. If you owe property tax, you certainly should pay property taxes. But the arguments have been from several members is that the fact of the matter, we're sort of still in a pandemic. Many people that have lost their jobs, become from full-time to part-time workers. And the burden, it seems as if this is just bad timing to even give local government the option of increasing the collection fee to 30%. It just seems as if it's bad timing.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
And I agree. This bill was brought to us last year before the pandemic. So we had this ready to go and went through last year. So it's the timing was before all this happened. So we're just bringing it back this year.
Representative Miller.
And for explanation, this is not about personal property taxes. It is not about that, correct?
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
It's tangible property taxes. Tangible personal property taxes.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? See no objection. We're voting All those in favor of House Bill 358 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 76, 15 nay, 3 present, not voting.
House Bill 358, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 779 by Leader Lamberth relative to COVID-19 response.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 779 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to defer to the sponsor for an explanation of this amendment due to the fact that it rewrites the bill. But meanwhile, I will boldly move to adopt.
Chairman Vaughn moves boldly to adopt amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 779 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 779, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 319 by Chairman Reagan relative to the Consumer Advocate Division in the Office of the Attorney General and Reporter. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 46.
Chairman Reagan moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 46, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 46 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage of Senate Bill 46 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
This is the same as Senate Amendment number 1. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as amended, will extend the Consumer Advocate Office and the AG's office for 1 year. It will sunset them on July 1st, 2022. It directs the Tennessee Public Utility Commission to present a plan to assume the responsibility of the Consumer Advocate Division. This would be at the time of the sunset of that division in the AG's office. The Tennessee Public Utility Commission already has a Consumer Services Division. It makes sense to place these responsibilities with the Utility Commission. And the intent is that the Utility Commission comes back with a plan to allow more collaboration, audit, analysis, and less litigation. A plan for placing these responsibilities inside Consumer Services does the following. It brings the function into an existing Consumer Services Division. It eliminates duplication and ensures that TPUC has all of the consumer protection functions, not just a portion, and it reinforces the view that litigation is a last resort. It also establishes that the regulatory process should consist of audit and analysis from an agency with the expertise that analyze both financial and operational functions. Under the current process, the Consumer Advocate Division of the AG's office is funded by the general fund. Under this proposal, if it moves, it will be fee-based by the users. With that explanation, I renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. And to the sponsor, I didn't have a chance to speak to you. But help us understand what the duplication is that we're eliminating.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated earlier, we have two consumer services functions right now, one with the Tennessee Utility Commission, Public Utility Commission, and one in the AG's office. There's really no need to have two. The states surrounding us have their consumer services divisions in their public utility commissions, which is where ours was prior to the 1990s. This bill simply moves it back and aligns us with the states around us. Did I answer your question, sir?
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And when you say the litigation will decrease, who's responsible for litigation if necessary? Will it still go back to the AG's office?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It could, to answer your question, but the purpose of moving it is to put it in an agency where they can resolve these differences before litigation becomes necessary.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And did the requests for this legislation come from the AG or from any of the consumer advocacy groups? And have they signed off on it?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there have been discussions with the AG's office. They like getting general funds, to answer the question straightforward, because the attorneys in their office that are funded by this particular agency do other things. So they basically get some free services out of them. I don't suppose they're going to be happy to give that up. But the Tennessee Public Utility Commission has come forward and asked this bill to be brought forward, and it makes good sense. For that reason, I bring it.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Thank you for your responses. I'm still not comfortable, but thank you for your responses, sir.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. With regards to the Tennessee consumer protection issues, why is the Utility Commission better positioned to address these matters than the Attorney General's office?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Because the Public Utility Commission office already has the experts in the field in their office to perform analysis and be able to work out the details over complaints from consumers and get them resolved before litigation has to happen.
Representative Clemens.
Is there any data, or have you presented any data throughout the process, and I apologize for not knowing this already, that has shown a decrease in enforcement of the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act or any of those types of regulatory issues by the state?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have not seen any data that addresses what you're talking about, but I didn't particularly look at that.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. The reason I asked that question is because several years ago, before a majority of this body was here, this same body pretty much decimated the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act. And so now I'm concerned that we are even taking more teeth out of consumer protection by removing it from the Attorney General's office, which has a specific skill set, and placing it with another department. And now you're characterizing it as litigation being the last option. But sometimes that is the best tool to have to deter the type of conduct that we want to prevent. So that's the source of my concern with this legislation. And I'm concerned that we're not enforcing these laws to the extent we could be or should be. And there are people out there who feel like they can cheat consumers. And now, by removing it from the Attorney General's office, what signal does that send to the people of Tennessee in combination with the statement made today that litigation is the last option? So that's my concern with the legislation. And also, one last question. Are the 6 attorneys, and I think you said this, are the 6 attorneys in the Attorney General's office are going to stay there? Those positions aren't going to go away?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's going to be up to the Attorney General and the funding that they have in their budget to support them.
Representative Clemens.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And is the Utility Commission going to have to hire new attorneys or transfer them over from the Attorney General's office for this purpose?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. the Tennessee Public Utility Commission already has the personnel in place. They already deal with some of these issues, so they don't need to hire anybody else.
Representative Clemmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you may have, Mr. Sponsor, said this. I couldn't hear everything you were saying. Can you just kind of give me the short version as to why you need to carry this legislation?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the answer straightforwardly is government efficiency and government effectiveness. We have two agencies right now, essentially with their fingers in the same pie, trying to help or hurt, as the case may be, depending on how efficient they are, our consumer protection agencies. The one best positioned to deal with this is the Tennessee Public Utility Commission, which was, in fact, prior to the 90s, doing this. And as I mentioned, in all the states surrounding us, also, that is the case. By having the Attorney General's office involved, we are duplicating efforts and paying for it out of the general fund. The Tennessee Public Utility Commission is fee supported by the members of the Public Utility Group.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just, Mr. Chairman, direct question. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of side conversations on this. It's the amendment that is before us asks for a report to be submitted next year on how to move this, but it does not actually move anything out of the Attorney General's office. Is that accurate, or are we moving this today, or are we asking for a report on how to move it today?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Leader. That is exactly the case. This bill is asking for a study on the most efficient, best way to make the move, and assuming it is determined, another bill will be brought next year.
Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman and sponsor of the bill. I just want to clarify, because again, I think there was a little bit of back and forth and some confusion on this. No one's moving anyone's positions at this point. Nobody's losing any responsibilities at this point. It is literally a study for us to take up next year as to whether or not to move. Again, is that accurate?
Chairman Reagan.
You're absolutely correct, sir.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 46, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
68, 24 nays, 3 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 46, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 577 by Chairman Reagan, relative to human reproduction. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1392.
Chairman Reagan moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1392, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1392 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage of Senate Bill 1392 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Withdraw. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to ensure that the family life curriculum information meets state standards. Additionally, it allows a parent of a student to request to review the information in our family life curriculum and to opt a student out of any portion of the family life curriculum without penalty to the student. This bill does not change state requirements concerning contraception information. In fact, the family life curriculum must still emphasize that abstinence is the only method that removes all risk of sexually transmitted diseases and pregnancy. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Lamar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield, please?
Chairman Reagan.
I yield.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing this bill. I understand your concerns, but I do want to highlight just a few points of the fact that according to the Tennessee Commission on Children, we have a STD rate among, to be clear, 15 to 17-year-olds of 20.5. Within 2019, the latest data coming out that says 5,203 teens in our states were diagnosed with STDs. With that being said, the reality of the situation, just to bring light to it, teens are engaging in sexual activities. There's nothing that we can do about it or to avoid that. And so I think that it's important that as a state in this curriculum, we provide medically accurate, evidence-based options for our students to learn while they're in school. We have a high STD rates among teens. They're engaging in sexual activity, and we don't think that it's appropriate that we limit that information. Again, if we want to stop unintended pregnancies, STDs, or teens seeking to have abortions, and I've pushed legislation to defer them from making that choice, I then think that we should make sure we keep our laws evidence-based, give teens options, because no matter how we're legislate, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. And so we need to make sure they're able to access the information accurately, medically, and it's evidence-based to prevent unintended pregnancies, STDs. Thank you so much.
Jim Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I read from the bill. This information will be presented in subparagraph A in a manner consistent with this part that clearly informs students that while such methods, which refers to what you just talked about, may reduce the risk of acquiring sexually transmitted disease or becoming pregnant, only abstinence removes all risk. These must be reviewed and approved by the local boards of education or charter school governing body prior to the information being used in the LEA or public charter schools in a family life curriculum to ensure A, medical accuracy, B, age appropriateness, C, in compliance with this part, and finally, and the reason this bill is here, aligned with the academic standards in this state. Did that address your question, Madam?
Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the explanation. I have another question, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. Is the penalty still in there that is going to penalize staff for providing contraception options to students who ask for them?
Jim Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is nothing in this bill that changes the current practice that the Department of Health has put forward.
Representative Lamar.
Is the current practice to fine those staff members $500 if they are caught providing contraception to students?
Jim Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does not address that.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you. I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, if you could clear this one up for me. Does this bill require that medically acceptable contraceptive information be approved by the textbook commission before disseminated?
Jim Reagan.
No, ma'am, it does not.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, sir. And to the sponsor, I couldn't hear you clearly in your responses to earlier comments. And there was in some of the memo, the fiscal memo, it makes reference to Title 10 and risking that federal funding. Will the bill as amended, are you comfortable that there is no risk to federal funding?
Jim Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You are looking at the fiscal memo for the first draft. The amendment that is on the bill now says that there is no risk of that.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, I appreciate that. And I'm not clear on what the response was on whether the current curriculum that involves the distribution of condoms, contraceptives if necessary, is that still allowed, or does this bill prohibit that?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I believe your assertion is incorrect, sir. The current curriculum does not require that. A curriculum is a course of instruction. That which is provided by the health department and given to school counselors, and information that's given to school counselors remains unchanged by this bill.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Speaker, it's still difficult to hear, but I believe, sponsor, you said that nothing changes in that respect under the bill because they're the individuals who are responsible for carrying out those responsibilities are not impacted by the bill. It's not addressed.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I understood your question correctly, sir, this bill does not address what you're asking about. The requirements that the health department sets forth for distribution of information concerning contraception, the provision thereof is not affected by this bill. This bill addresses curriculum for family life.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you, Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is bill to the sponsor. This bill says it prohibits promotion implicitly or explicitly any gateway sexual activity. What is, can you explain what a gateway sexual activity is?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And I believe, sir, you are referring to something other than the amendment that makes the bill. For the sake of clarity, Tennessee Code Annotated 49-6, 1304, subparagraph B, subpart 4 is amended by deleting that subsection and substituting distributed contraception on school property provided that medically accurate information about contraception and condoms is consistent with public policy and may be provided so long as the information is presented in a manner consistent with this part that clearly informs students that while such methods may reduce the risk of acquiring sexually transmitted disease or becoming pregnant, only abstinence removes all risk. Subpart B, reviewed and approved by the local Board of Education or charter school governing body prior to the information being used by the LEA or public charter school in a family life curriculum to ensure that it is medically accurate, age appropriate, in compliance with this part, aligned with academic standards in this state, and provided upon request to a parent of a student attending the school in the LEA or the charter school to allow the parent to review the information and opt the parent's student out of receiving the information as part of the family life curriculum without penalty. The last part of the bill says it takes effect on July 1st, 2021. Please note that nothing I have read to you, which is the sum total of the bill now, has anything to do with what you said, sir.
Chairman Dixie.
So this replaces on the original bill, section 4, subsection 1B, this amendment that you just read.
Chairman Reagan.
The first line of this amendment says by deleting all language after the enacting clause and substituting what I just read to you.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question, McGall. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1392 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 70, 22 nays, one present not voting.
Senate Bill 1392, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 580 by Chairman Reagan and others relative to education. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to refer this bill to the Education Administration Committee for further action.
Without objection, re-refer to Education Administration Committee. So ordered. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1266 by Chairman Reagan relative to education. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1343.
Chairman Reagan moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1343. Paul be second. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1343 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage of Senate Bill 1343 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment Number 1, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Current law on workers' compensation-related issues when it comes to an LEA personnel is unclear and challenging to implement, especially for districts that do not have workers' comp insurance. That is to say, they are self-insured. The amendment that makes the bill essentially does three things, and it's to clarify what is required of an LEA that does not have workers' compensation coverage, i.e. is self-insured, when it comes to on-the-job injuries. This clarifies that the law deleting the language shall be the same as LEA workers' compensation and substitutes that LEA must comply with personal injury rules of the State Board of Education. The personal injury rules of the rules of Department of Education and State Board give a minimum requirement of what an LEA must provide for personal injury leave to a teacher and dictates that the LEA must create a policy to address this rule. It clarifies that full benefits will be those benefits that the LEA provided and that the employee opted into at the time of leave. This ensures that a teacher, presumably in this case the employee, will continue to be provided the same benefits the LEA provided before the injury. Lastly, it makes it clear that benefits are the same as if an LEA had workers' compensation insurance and that can be provided for up to 1 year. With that explanation, I stand ready to answer questions and renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, my question is, what happens if you have a teacher that is injured as a result of an incident in school, and those injuries last longer than 1 year, and the teacher is still unable to return to work due to those injuries? Are those benefits going to be cut off at the end of 1 year?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does not address anything different than what is the current situation as it stands right now.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you. Could you please clarify, though? I thought it indicated that the benefits would caused by a violent criminal act would not last for more than 1 year.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It requires that the workers' compensation insurance last for at least that long, and if the LEA is self-insured, that their coverage must last that long as well.
Representative Griffey.
So it is accurate that this amendment specifies that an LEA is not required to provide benefits for a teacher who is injured in the course of employment caused by a violent criminal act for more than 1 year. So if a teacher suffers injuries and those injuries prevent that teacher from being able to resume duties for longer than a year, the LEA is only going to be on the hook for 1 year. And that is a change from present law. Is that correct?
Chairman Reagan.
This bill is not intended to change present law, sir. It's intended to specify that LEAs that are self-insured must meet the same criteria as those who have workers' compensation insurance. The benefits that I just spoke of make it clear that the benefits are the same as if an LEA had workers' compensation and must be provided for up to 1 year. That's what it says.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. And to the sponsor, looking for clarification again on the benefits. If a teacher is injured through a violent criminal act and the LEA is self-insured, right now they can carry the benefits as long as they want to, and they can carry full salary on as long as the LEA wishes. Is that correct?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the LEA is self-insured, whatever they have specified in their policy at the current time exists, and it's different for a number of different LEAs. This law is intended to provide clarity and consistency across the state so that those LEAs that are self-insured have to be at least as good as or better than, if they choose, workers' compensation and insurance.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, I'm still not clear from your response, sir. Will an LEA that's self-insured be able to pay a teacher full salary going forward as long as the LEA determines? Or will this reduce the time period to 1 year?
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill specifies that must be at least a year. It does not limit it. It also clarifies that full benefits will be those benefits that the LEA provided and the employee opted into at the time.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. It's still a little murky, but thank you, sponsor, for trying to clarify.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1343 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, 2 nays.
Senate Bill 1343, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
SJR 10 by Leader Lamberth, a resolution proposing amendment to Article 2 and Article 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to the exercise of powers and duties of the governor during disability.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in SJR number 10.
Leader Lamberth moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 10, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the clerk read SJR 10 as amended for the first reading.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution number 10 as amended. A resolution proposing an amendment to Article 2 and Article 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to the exercise of the powers and duties of the governor during disability, whereas the welfare and stability of the state are best served if a qualified person with governmental experience is immediately available to assume the powers and duties of the office of governor when the governor is unable to do so. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that a 2/3 majority of all the members of each house concurring, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on the journals, that it is proposed that Article 3, Section 12 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by adding the following language immediately following the current language in the section. Whenever the governor transmits to the Secretary of State, the Speaker of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives a written signed declaration that the governor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, the powers and duties of the office of governor shall be temporarily discharged by the Speaker of the Senate as acting governor, or if that office is unoccupied, then by the Speaker of the House of Representatives as acting governor, until the governor transmits to the same officials a written signed declaration that the governor is able to discharge the powers and duties of the office. Whenever a majority of the commissioners of administrative departments of the executive department transmits to the Secretary of State, the Speaker of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written signed declaration that the governor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, the Speaker of the Senate shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting governor, or if that office is unoccupied, then the Speaker of the House of Representatives shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting governor until the governor transmit to the same officials a written signed declaration that the governor is able to discharge the powers and duties of the office. Whenever a speaker is temporarily discharging the powers and duties of the office of governor as acting governor, such speaker shall not be required to resign the speaker's position as the speaker or to resign as a member of the General Assembly, and shall retain the speaker's salary and not receive the governor's salary, but such speaker shall not preside as speaker or vote as a member of the General Assembly during the time the speaker is acting governor. Be it further resolved that it is proposed that Article 3, Section 13 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by adding the following language immediately before the period and at the end of the section. Except as provided in Article 3, Section 12, with regard to the Speaker of the Senate or the Speaker of the House of Representatives, temporarily discharging the powers and duties of the office of governor as acting governor, be it further resolved that it is proposed that Article 2, Section 26 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by adding the following language at the end of the section. This section shall not apply with regard to the Speaker of the Senate or the Speaker of the House of Representatives temporarily discharging the powers and duties of the office of governor as acting governor under Article 3, Section 12. Be it further resolved that in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, the foregoing proposed amendment shall be submitted to the people at the next general election in which the governor is to be chosen, the same being the 2022 November general election, and the Secretary of State is directed to place such proposed amendment on the ballot for that election. Be it further resolved that the clerk of the Senate is directed to deliver copies of this resolution to the Secretary of State, with this final resolving clause being deleted from such copies.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that SJR 10 as amended be set for second reading for Thursday, April 29th, 2021.
Without objection, so ordered. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1126 by Chairman Farmer relative to children, Mr. Speaker, by Representative Russell relative to children. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 383.
Representative Russell moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 383, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 383 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage of Senate Bill 383 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker. It's similar to Senate Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Amendment 1 is not the same as the House. Therefore, I move to adopt House Amendment 1.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next. Oh, all right, my bad. Reconsider my actions. Very good. All right. Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of Amendment Number 1. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1126 defines the term seclusion as it relates to juvenile detention centers, youth development centers, and facilities where children are taken into custody prior to or after a court ruling. This bill will fix a loophole that allowed juveniles to be placed in a segregated confinement setting for extended periods of time. It will not be considered seclusion under current law because they could hear and see others. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, is it the intent of this legislation under Section 1, Part C, for the department to create rules for how to deal with an especially violent inmate or an inmate who is suicidal?
Representative Russell.
That is correct. The department may, by rule or policy, provide alternate treatment options for a child who cannot safely rejoin the resident population following the maximum period of seclusion.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 383, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, one nay.
Senate Bill 383 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 697 by Representative Russell relative to governmental tort liability.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 697 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt Amendment 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption amendment number 1. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 697 would draw certain 501c4s into the Governmental Tort Liability Act if they provide functions and services traditionally provided by municipalities. However, they would need to meet a strict criteria to be eligible. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 697 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, nays 3 present, not voted.
House Bill 697, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 119 by Chairman Faison and others relative to the Silver Alert Program. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 102.
Chairman Faison moves substitute conform Senate Bill 102 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is creating the Silver Alert. I renew my motion.
Chairman Faison moves passage of Senate Bill 102 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
I renew my motion.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 102, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 102, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1179 by Chair Lady Moody and others relative to political campaign committees. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1120.
Chair Lady Moody moves substitute conform Senate Bill 1120, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1120 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Moody moves passage of Senate Bill 1120 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Amendment number 1 by Chairman Rudd. Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Rudd, you're recognized.
Move to withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, move to withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Leader Lambert. Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt amendment number 2.
Representative Lambert moves adoption amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to a voice vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Moody renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Representative Powell, was that a question or is that a, okay, very good. Seeing no objection, all those in favor of Senate Bill 1120 vote aye, as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 18 nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1120, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body to the heel of the regular calendar. House Bill 187 by Chairman Kiesling, relative to alternative facilities for DUI offenders. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk. Mr. Speaker, that's item 7.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1590.
Chairman Kiesling moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1590 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1590 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kiesling moves passage of Senate Bill 1590 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Bill 187 will allow immunity. The bill will allow immunity from liability for any cause of action or claim for damages arising out of a person's participation in a private, appropriately licensed substance abuse treatment program approved by the court as an alternative facility. Members, I may take you back to, I think it was 2019, July, where we amended TCA 5510-402 to allow individuals who have been convicted of DUI convictions to serve their time in alternative facilities. Now, this legislation will allow any government entity, i.e., city or county, that allows an individual to attend one of these this type facility be immune from any liability associated with such. This was actually brought to me, members, by many of you who know former DA, District Attorney General, up in Cookville, Randy York. He and his family, once this was amended, he and his family began the Temperance Academy, actually in Crossville. Now, currently there's two of these facilities that's licensed through our Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. They are in Christiana, down in Christiana. It's the DUI education facility, and again in Crossville, which I've already mentioned, it's the Temperance Academy. The intent of this bill is to be proactive to prevent any unnecessary cost or expense of future litigation to the counties or, again, municipalities to participate in these programs. And to be actually where this came from, according to Mr. York, he had approached, I think it was the city of Knoxville, I'm pretty sure it was, about possibly instituting one of these over there in the city. And in their discussions, they were concerned about any liability that might be forthcoming to to the city, or for that matter, Knox County. So anyway, that's why he brought this to myself and Senator Bailey. So with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I'll entertain any questions, renew my motion.
Chairman Kiesling renews his motion. Any discussion? Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I just got one question. I think it's obvious, but there's no intent with this legislation to reduce or restrict any local government's right to sue or recover damages, is there?
Chairman Kiesling.
No, that's correct, Mr. Mitchell, or Representative Mitchell. That's true.
Representative Mitchell.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1590, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 1590, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call up next message, Mr.
House
Clerk.
Bill 5, stating by Chairman Reagan, relative to administrative procedure. Mr. Speaker, on April 26, 2021, the Senate refused to receive this action in adopting Senate Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring with the Senate amendment, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies.
Chairman Reagan moves to refuse to recede from our action and non-recurring in Senate Amendment number 1, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the difference between the two bodies. Properly seconded. Without objection, motion carries. I appoint the following members: Representative Reagan, Representative Reedy, and Representative Wendell. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that HJR 98 be set for tomorrow's calendar.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to place House Bill 1015 on the next available calendar.
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will, after consultation with both leaders, I would like to, for the introduction and immediate consideration of H.R. 96.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
House Resolution 96 by Representative Mitchell, a resolution to recognize and congratulate Savannah Taylor on the occasion of her graduation.
You've heard the caption. Are there any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Representative Mitchell.
I renew my motion.
Representative Mitchell moves adoption of House Resolution 96, properly seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Resolution 96 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare it adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Bill 738 from the committee and the House.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House House Bill 830, substitute for the Senate bill on the same subject, amendment passed by the Senate.
Thursday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate. I'm directed to return to the House House Bill 619, substitute for the Senate bill on the same subject, amendment passed by the Senate.
Thursday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House House Bill 1145, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Thursday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the ladies of the House would like to announce that we're holding a toddler shower for Representative Calfee and his wife Marilyn, and to welcome little Sawyer into our family. So it's Monday at 1 p.m. on the 8th floor. Please be there. And I hear a little birdie told me that diapers and gift cards are perfect. They're hoping they don't get 99 toys. So thank you.
Representative Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce to the members that the local House Government Committee is closed, subject to call of the chair.
Representative Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government Operations Committee will be meeting next week to hear two bills. As of the current time, the date and time of the expected meeting is Monday morning at 9 a.m. in House Hearing Room 1. Again, the Government Operations Committee will be meeting next week, Monday morning, 9 a.m., House Hearing Room 1.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind the Democratic caucus that immediately after session ends, we'll meet at the Legislative Law Library for a quick meeting. Thank you.
Representative Brickham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Cigar Caucus, because of the weather, is going to move the fellowship out to the porch behind the Speaker's office. Immediately following session, quality cigars will be provided.
If y'all would like to build me a porch, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you all. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Black Caucus will be meeting behind your office also. I'm just kidding. Mr. Speaker, just a reminder to the Black Caucus members, 6:30, we will be convening 6:30. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, just prior to session today, the set of rule suspensions, traditionally known as the flow motion, was emailed to all members. Those set of particular rule suspensions were also uploaded to the dashboard app. You will find it at the heel of today's regular calendar on the dashboard. That is there for your review, and it is anticipated that that will be brought up under unfinished business tomorrow.
Leader Camper. Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order for the clerk.
All right, go ahead, Representative Stewart.
I just want to confirm, because the flow motion, obviously a very significant motion, that this is the typical flow motion with the same rules changes that, for example, we passed last year at the end of session to accomplish the business of the House. Is that correct?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, these are the same rule suspensions that this body suspended last summer during the flow motion, with the exception of one rule that no longer exists, so we don't need to suspend it. But other than that, it's the exact same rules that were suspended last year.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank the clerk for making that available. Duly appreciate it, and the request so that everybody can read that and have a look and make sure it's the same. My seatmate's a little discouraged because he was trying to send a co-sponsor request and wouldn't let him do it on dashboard. But anyways, maybe we'll add him on as a sponsor and put a sign-on sheet for the flow motion. But thank you for satisfying that request. I appreciate it.
Any further comments under announcements? All right, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 29th, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 29th, 2021.